Okay guys, welcome back. Dr. H here for Octo Beard Media. Today we're going to make this scene. I'm going to show you how to create the lights for it. I'm going to show you how some of these assets were modelled. I'm going to show you how I got this beautiful night sky in here. And finally, I'm going to show you how I got this creepy music to work. So come with me please, as we build the Creepy Carnival. Okay guys, so let me show you how I made that scene. Now as you can see, I've got a few assets in here already. I'll be talking about some of those as we go, and we may well be grabbing more as we go along. The first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to create that scene. I'm going to create some 3D object. I'm going to create terrain. This terrain's far too big, so with my terrain selected, I'm going to go to settings here. I'm going to go down here to the bottom to screen resolution, and I'm going to change it to about 75 meters by 75 meters. And I'm going to limit the height to about 150. Okay, so what we've got now is a much smaller, more manageable terrain size. So the first thing I'm going to do, just quickly using the terrain tool, is I'm going to pull up some height. I'm going to hold the edges up like this so that the player can't just run off the edge. And create a bit of sort of geography to sort of just trap them in here. I'm going to put this in a speed model now, I think. So I'm going to build the terrain around the edge here. I want this to be blocked off. And then I'm going to just make this carnival's going to go in here. And I'm going to block that bit off, and the carnival's going to go in there. Okay, let's work with some textures. So I'm going to create the paint texture tool here. I'm going to add a couple of textures. I'm going to add this grass texture. That's going to be my base. And I'm probably going to need to tile it a little bit more. Yes, I definitely am. I'm going to go to edit textures. I'm going to take it down to about 5 by 5. And then I'm going to add another texture. And that's going to be the sand here. I reckon we're sort of kind of on the edge of the desert here with this carnival. So I'm going to, okay. So what am I going to do? Right, so I think we're going to start by painting some sand texture in here. I'm probably going to do this as a speed model, so you can just see how I'm painting the top bits here that are dry and arid, and paint a little bit in here on a sort of high opacity, and then I'm going to drop the opacity down for kind of blending purposes, and just kind of blend it in with the rest here like this. Okay, it's kind of good, yeah. Okay, at this stage I think I'm going to bring a character into my scene, and I'm going to see what this looks like at ground level. Just going to drop them into this bit here, just frame them, make sure that their butt's not sticking through the floor, which it is. Lift them up, and you can see here from the angle of the viewing frustrum that they're completely facing the wrong direction, so I'm going to turn them around. And I'm going to hit play, and yeah, kind of looks alright, doesn't it? Yeah, it's a good start, I think. Okay, so this is where I'm going to build my carnival, or carnival. We'll come into play mode. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to bring in a couple of assets that I've already pre-made. So there's a linked tutorial in the comments section that shows you how to make these assets. They're made entirely in Unity using just basic textures that I've downloaded. So I'm going to bring in this Ferris wheel, I'm going to angle it, already thinking about where I'm going to put the light source behind it. So I'm going to kind of put it there so the sun can stream in behind it. Yeah, like that, cast shadows like that. Then I've got these weird kind of alien eye things that I've created. If I just spin one round and click off, you can see they're kind of weird, kind of creepy. What are they? I don't know what they are. I'm going to dot a few of those around, and we're gonna I'm going to put a couple in particular, move them up here to be kind of gatekeepers. I think they're a bit small. Let's make them a bit bigger. Let's make them, let's say, 3 by 3 by 3. Then bring that up. And they're going to be my kind of gatekeepers, I guess, almost. For the gateway there. Yeah, there we go. Just drop that in there. And then duplicate that, move it out, bring it back here. And yeah, that kind of looks alright. Move him back a little bit, save, and let's see what it looks like. Yeah, that kind of works, yeah, alright. Kind of creepy and a bit weird. Yeah, I like that. Okay, so now we've got a few things in our scene. We're going to work with light. Now, there's 2 different ways of working with light in Unity, and there's 4 different types of light. So first of all, you can go to Game Object, Light, and you can start creating these lights here. Now, we're going to look at these 3 today. We're not going to look at area light because that's a baked light, and I want to get into baking in a context of a different tutorial. So we're going to look at these three here, which are dynamic lights. But we're also going to take a look at the lighting window, which if you click here, will probably come up as a separate window for you, and then you can just tab it in with the inspector here, so you can kind of flick between the two. Yeah, like that. So there's a couple of things I want to point out in here that are going to be most useful. The first one is this idea of the ambient intensity of the light. So even if I delete this directional light from play, there's always a little bit of light. There's always some kind of ambient light in the background. You can see here, I know these things look like they're emitting light, but I'll get on to how we've done that later. So there's already some ambient light in the scene, and that ambient light is coming from the skybox. Now the skybox is this huge, great infinity thing around me that is the sky. It looks like it just goes on forever. Actually, it doesn't. It's actually a clever six-sided map where the seams join in at the corners, so you can't actually tell that you're inside a massive cube. However, the light is coming from the skybox, so I'm going to do two things. If I take the intensity down to 0, and if I change the reflection source of the light from skybox to custom, then you can see it drops right down. What I've got now is I've got a situation where I've got virtually no light. I can add my own light sources in rather than the ambient light. So what I can do now is I can start adding in other lights. So I'm going to start with a directional light. A directional light, as its name suggests, fires light out in one particular direction. You can see the direction it's shooting it in here. If you rotate it, you can see how it changes the angle from which the light is coming. And the basic default settings, Skybox settings, usually has one of these directional lights. When you start the game, you have one of these directional lights, and that works as the sun source in the Skybox. I'm going to have it work for the sun as me as well. However, you can see the sun moving in the Skybox as I change the angle. I am going to have twilight, dusk. So directional light, as the name suggests, fires light out in one direction, and that's fine. That's great for what we want here. If I go back into the inspector of this light, one of the things I can do is I can determine the colour of the light. So obviously I'm going to make it kind of sort of orangey, end of the day kind of orange, maybe a little bit of black in it, because it's getting kind of dark, isn't it? And you can see in real time down here how the light is kind of changing the colour based on what I'm doing. I want sort of maybe kind of here, yeah, dark side twilight light. And the second thing here, really important, is I can tell it to generate shadows. Now obviously the shadows are being cast by the object, but in Unity it's the light that you need to activate the shadows on. Each individual light can toggle shadows on or off. You can have hard shadows or soft shadows. I'm going to go with hard shadows here. And now I can start seeing if my light's in the right place, and it doesn't look like it is. No, I'm not getting any shadows at all from this. So if I lift it up a little bit, bring it slightly closer, it doesn't actually matter if it's closer. Doesn't make a difference. That's just so I can get it out of the way. And then I start rotating it around and just see where the shadow, there we go, starts to kind of appear there, doesn't it? So what I want to do is I want to move this around. I want to rotate it up like that, and then I just want to move it out of the way of my scene just so it's not in the way. Like I say, it won't be visible. So as you can see, if I bring in about there, and maybe take the intensity down to a little, just take the intensity down a little bit because it's getting towards the end of the day, save, and I push play, then you can see I've got this kind of really eerie light coming in here, haven't I? Which is really creepy and great. So the second kind of light we're going to take a look at is a point light. So I'm going to take a 3D object. So we're going to take a game object light, point light. So point light shoots light out in all directions. I'm going to change the point light here. I'm going to make it really bright yellow. I'll explain why in a second. So if I just move this over here and drop it down, you can see as I get closer to the ground, if I zoom in a little bit, as I get closer to the ground, the light comes out of it. And because of point light, obviously if I rotate it, it doesn't make any difference because it's shooting out in every direction. But what I can do is I can change the range here, which will also change the intensity of the light inside. What I'm going to do is I'm going to use this light here for my weird alien eyes. So you can see here, obviously the source of the light is this, but if I put this inside the object, then it doesn't illuminate the object itself, and I quite like it to. So I'm going to cheat slightly. So I'm going to pull it out of the object, and I'm going to position it in front so that it looks like the light's coming back on it. It's a bit of a cheat, but pretty much everyone does it because it just looks a little bit better, I think. I'm going to position it in front of this here, and yeah, that looks about right. Yeah, that looks kind of good. Yep, okay, I'm happy with that. So it kind of looks like the light's coming from that source, but also that it's kind of lighting the front of the object as well, so I can see what's going on. What I'm going to do then, since I can, is I'm just going to make that light the child of the object there, and then rather than create a separate light from scratch in front of each object I make, I'm just going to duplicate that object. It will come with the light, and I can just move it across like so. So I can fill my scene with as many of these as I want. Now, a word of warning with lights: every time you create a dynamic light, the point lights or the spotlights or the directional lights, these are real-time lights, which means they eat up a little bit of runtime. So if you have a scene with lots and lots of lights, then you're probably going to want to look into baking lights onto the scene, because that's just rendered once at the start of the scene. Okay, the third kind of light I want to look at, I'm just going to go back here for this, and I'm just briefly going to model something that the light could come from. Now, I'm going to use a cylinder because I'm basically going to be making a kind of a spotlight. So you don't actually need you don't need a source. You can just have the point light coming out of nothing, but it looks a bit weird. So I'm going to create something for the spotlight to kind of come out of. And because it's a spotlight, maybe it's a searchlight, I'm going to kind of angle it down. I'm going to move it a little bit like that, and I'm going to drop it into my scene like so. There we go. So that's the source my light's going to come from. Now I'm going to create the light. So it's going to be a spotlight. So the spotlight, as you can see, if I just change the colour so you can see it a bit better, maybe, I don't know, red. The spotlight, you can see, as I bring the spotlight closer to the ground, zoom in a little, there we go, okay. As I bring it closer to the ground, you get this kind of red light here, and it only shoots out in the direction of the light. So if I change the direction of the light, obviously it changes the kind of the shape of the spot on the floor, and the distance and the intensity and everything else. So you can change the intensity with this slider here, or type. You can also change the range, which is changing the numbers here, but you can achieve the same thing by dragging the end piece here. And you can also change the angle of the spotlight, but you can achieve the same thing by pulling these here. Okay, so I've tweaked this a little bit to kind of get it the same angle, or roughly the same angle. I want it to look like the light is coming out of the source, and I don't think it does, so I'm just going to do this manually and eyeball it a little bit, tweak it, move it around here, lift it up a little bit, like so. Let's take slide it out there, take a quick look from the front. Let's maybe move the centre along a little bit, so it's kind of coming out of there, and then, yeah, I think the angle's about right. Okay, now, important word of warning, if this lip of the light here sticks out over the terrain, then obviously it won't cast light properly. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to change the angle of the light, make it really kind of tight focus beam, and then bring it in like that so that it sits below the terrain. Otherwise it just stops and doesn't hit the floor. And of course, if I now make spotlight the child of the cylinder, anything that I do to move the cylinder also moves the spotlight as well. So those are my three basic lights. There's one other thing that I've done that I want to talk about, and that concerns these kind of alien eye things over here. So this isn't light in the strictest sense, but it does create that wonderful glowing effect that gives the illusion of light, or light emission here. So I'll do this by creating one in yellow and one in, what's this side of the colour wheel, blue. Okay, so I'm just going to rename this one as yellow glow, and I'm going to create a new material, and I'm going to call this one blue glow, like that. Now, one of the things that we didn't get into last time around with materials is this idea of emission here. So the albedo will control the basic colour of the light, and I want the basic colour of this light to be a kind of quite dark blue. But the emission will control what colour it glows. And I want the emission to be a kind of sort of a light blue. Yeah, like that. So this is now my blue glow. And if I find my alien eye, and I find the sphere here, which has got the yellow shader on it here, and I just drag this on instead, then now it glows blue. I mean, it's still got this yellow light in front of it, but it glows blue. So let's take a look. Yep, it now gives the effect of glowing blue, which is really quite cool. It's still being lit by this wrong colour light. That's going to bother me. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to go back into my blue glow here, and I'm just going to find out what my hex colour is, because that's the exact shade of colour here. I think I'm going to want to use the lighter one here. Yep. I'm going to copy that hex here, and then I'm going to go into the light here, and I'm just going to paste that into the colour settings there. And then I've got this blue light here in exactly the same shade as the glow emission there. And that's quite cool, I think. There's my spotlight there. So you may have noticed one of the things about my Ferris wheel in the opening sequence was that the Ferris wheel was moving, so it was rotating. So in order to do that, I'm going to show you how to work with a couple of quick scripts here. So what I want to do if I want to make it rotate is I'm going to create an empty game object. I'm going to call it F wheel rot point. Okay, Ferris wheel rotation point. Okay, so what I'm now going to do is change the Ferris wheel's rotation to -12, and make sure my rotation point is also at -12. Otherwise, it'll start spinning off in a really weird axis. I'm going to try and get this in the middle of the wheel. I'm going to try and eyeball it. That looks about right to me. Okay, so what I'm going to do is I am going to make all of the wheel stuff here the child of the rotation point. I'm going to put this in here first of all. And then I'm going to make everything in here, including the chairs, the child of the Ferris wheel rotation point. Yes, break prefab, yep. That needs to go in there. So that should mean that when I rotate it around first. Oh, yeah, we don't want those in there, do we? Let's take these stanchions out. Right, they don't belong in there. So when I rotate the Ferris wheel, rotation point, what I'm getting is the whole wheel rotating. You can see from this angle here. Yeah, that works fine. So we've got an issue with some of the chairs at the moment. It looks a little bit like a water wheel. They don't rotate, but we'll get to that in a second. First thing I'm going to do, now I've got this wheel rotation point, is I'm going to put a script on it. I've already written the script down here called wheel rot. So add the script, and then I'm going to open it up in MonoDevelop. So this is a basic introduction to something called variables. And a variable is not the most helpful name in scripting, but a variable is essentially a container. It allows you to contain a specific piece of information. You can have variables for lots and lots of different things. So in order to create a variable in JavaScript, simply say variable, then you give it a name. So for example, the name might be on-off, because it's an on-off switch. If it was, it would be of a type Boolean, because a Boolean is either yes or no, right or wrong, true or false, 1 or 0, on or off. The particular variable that we want here is a variable called speed. And speed is represented by a number, which can either be an integer or a float. I'm going to use a float because a float allows me to use decimal places. An integer would be whole numbers only, but I don't want that because I want a little bit more precision in my tweaking for the speed. So hit that, delete that, and then save. So if I go back into Unity, what you'll see, if I click back on the Ferris wheel rotation point, the thing that's got the script on it, is that it's added this variable here, speed. And that's great, because a little bit like x in an algebra equation, in a moment I'm going to go in, I'm going to write some code, and I'm going to use speed. And then if I want to change the speed, I don't have to keep going back into my script. I can just change it in Unity here. I'll show you what I mean. So this is a pretty simple script, so I don't need function start, because function start is only called at the start. I want something that's called right the way through. So just for my own personal OCD, I like to kind of do it like that, just so I can see where the function starts and ends. So what I could do is I could say transform.rotate, and then you put in some numbers for the x, the y, and the z values, in that order, x, y, z. I'm going to need to put some real numbers in a second, but we'll just for now leave them as 0. And then the final most important thing is times time dot delta time, with capital T's for the 2 times. brackets and semicolon to finish the statement. Just click save. So if I go back into Unity, just check my console, transform. Okay, so I've misspelt it, so I put transform. So go back in, fix that, save it, go back in, then it should delete that error. There we go. So the reason there are two audio listeners is because I have a first-person controller and a camera. You don't really need both, so I'm going to delete the main camera because I want to keep the first-person controller. You can put cameras in if you want to do cutscenes and things, but we'll do that in another video. So the error should also disappear on clear. There we go. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to go back into my script here. So the variable speed is a number, which means I can substitute it for any number, any instance of a number that I use anywhere. So instead of putting a number in these variables, I can put I can write the word speed. So if I look at my model, I think if I want to rotate it, I think it's someone stuck a pencil through the x-axis here, and they're going to rotate it round, like they're spinning it round. That's x, it's going right through there. So I'm going to rotate it round the x-axis so it spins that way rather than spinning like a flipping coin. So I'm just going to put 10 and click save just to test this, just to show you what happens if you put a number in. And let's play test to see what happens. And as you can see, my Ferris wheel is spinning, but it's spinning at roller coaster speeds, and it's probably going to kill someone. So at least it's spinning the right way rather than like a flipping coin. So what I could do is I could go back into the script and I could take it down to 8 and take it down to 7 and so on and so forth. But I don't really want to do that. I want to be able to just tweak it in Unity. So what I'm going to do instead, I'm just going to write the word speed, because it knows that speed is a number, and anywhere I've used numbers, I can just use the word speed instead. And then I'm going to go into Unity and I'm going to type the number that I want, the specific number. If I was to type speedier and try and save it, I'm going to get an error because it's never heard of speedier. It doesn't know what it is. I could create that variable, but until I do, it doesn't know what that is. So I'm going to get an error. But if I go back into my own develop and I put it as speed, then save, go back into Unity, then the error disappears and I can start changing the speed. So it's currently set to 0. I'm going to set it to 5. It's still a bit fast, isn't it? Yeah, I mean, I want something kind of slow and creepy. Maybe 2.5. Let's see what this looks like. And it's just this constant process of back and forth. It's still a bit fast. I'm going to go 1.5 and under. I want something really slow and scary and ominous. There we go. That's nice and creepy and ominous, isn't it? Okay, so you will have noticed that the chairs, I've got a bit closer here, the chairs are kind of doing this water wheel thing. They're in a fixed position and they're not really moving, so we don't want that. So a little while ago, I came across a script. I cannot take any of the credit for this script at all. I came across a script called SeatFixer. And what the SeatFixer does, what I'm going to do is I'm going to apply the SeatFixer to each one of the chairs, every single one of the seats. What the SeatFixer does is it tells the seat that the center of gravity is the center of gravity for the parent, which in this case is for the rotation point. So it'll constantly keep them in a fixed position like that. There we go. Clever, isn't it? You can see one or two modelling things with this that aren't perfect, but it's supposed to be a broken down Ferris wheel, so I might leave things as they are. This beam in there makes it look kind of sort of creepy and falling to pieces and dangerous, which is what I'm looking for. If you wonder what the script was for the SeatFixer, it's this. So you just copy that exactly as you see it there. It's just a function late update, and then I copy it in capitals where capitals, dots, and don't forget the minus here because that's very important. It controls the direction of the swing. So this is going to make it default to the parent's view of what is up and down. So whatever is the parent of the chair, it's going to know which way is up, and it's going to stay up. Try it, trust me, it works. That is the wheel rotation script again, just for quick recap. You can get all of these scripts from my website, which you can find in the link below in PDF format. Copy and paste them in, and don't forget to save your scripts when you're done with them. Okay guys, so I'm going to show you a few more things. The first one is how to model the fence that we saw at the start, the kind of the broken down gateway. And then the second is how to add some music, some background music, some basic background music to this scene. So we'll get into sound more in a later tutorial. So I'm going to create a 3D object, game object. I'm going to create a cube. I'm going to make it quite thin, I think. I'm going to make it about 0.2 by 0.2. And then I'm going to make it maybe, I don't know, how high do I want a fence to be? 4? Yeah, okay. That looks about right. So obviously, in order to turn this one stick into a fence, I'm going to lay it flat on the ground just so I can see what I'm doing. Got something flat to work against. Make that to -90, and I think I probably actually will lay it actually flat on the ground there, just so I've got some space to work around it. Okay, so what am I going to do? Well, it's going to be a rusty old fence, so the first thing I'm going to do is add the rust material to it. If I just click off, you can see the effect of the rust there. Then I'm just going to duplicate it, and I'm going to kind of take it out and probably eyeball this. I want it to be fairly regular, but it doesn't have to be perfect because it is a sort of broken down old fence, isn't it? I'm just going to do it in short sections like this. Doesn't have to be mathematically perfect, as I said. So I think that's probably enough for a fence section. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to make it tileable. So in order to do this, I'm going to create another one. I'm going to rotate it round. And I'm going to position it roughly in the centre. I'll probably be using 2 of these. I'm going to move it into the middle here, and I'm going to just go to overhead view, I think, and just grow it. I think now, in order to make this tileable, I can't have it the same on this end as the same on this end. Otherwise, you'll have a bit where it's double thickness. It needs to stick out on one end so it can kind of tile in to the other, tag into the other side like that. So I'm going to make it slightly larger than the width of the gate. Let's go top-down view. Okay, line this up perfectly. Yeah, like that. So now it juts out of one end, so we can tile it. I'm going to move this one down here, and I duplicate, and I'm going to move that one up to there. Okay, so I'm going to select the middle beam select. I'm going to create an empty game object, which I'd like to be somewhere near the middle beam. I'll just quickly check this for height. Yeah, it's okay. Okay, and then I'm going to call this fence, I guess. And now I'm going to make all of these cubes inside the fence. So I've created an object like this. So if I now drag my fence down into my scene down here, what it will do is it will create a prefab, just like I've done with the Ferris wheel and the alien eye in the other tutorial. So I can drag this out, it'll create another one. I can drag as many as I like. And the thing is, the prefab's going to be created exactly as the original, and the original is still flat. And I think that the default position I'm going to want to use a fence in is probably standing up. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to stand this up first of all, move it through 90 degrees, and then lift it off just so it's just sticking into the ground like so. And you're kind of happy with that. Yep, that's okay. And then I'm going to drag it down. I'm going to make a prefab from that instead. So all my other fences will come out standing up, and I can move them around from there. So what I'm then going to do is move my fence into position. So I'm going to probably speed model this section, because you can just see me kind of moving the fence around, moving it into position. You can create any kind of pattern that you want. It doesn't have to be realistic. I'm just going to put one on one side, one on the other side. Put one there, like that. And then I'm probably going to create another one and put it flat on the floor, because it's run down, it's fallen down. Rotate it round, move it down, and just put it on the floor like so. Okay, so now with this one, I'll come back into normal speed here. What I'm going to do is create a little empty game object. And this empty game object is going to be the hinge, a little bit like we did in the door in the previous tutorial. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to use this as a hinge to rotate the fence from the top corner point through the empty game object, so it looks like it's kind of hanging and listless. So what is that? That's fence 2, right? So I'm just making that the child of the fence hinge. There we go. And then fence hinge. I'm just going to go corner, pivot point. I'm just going to tweak this quickly. Speed here. You can see how I'm doing this. Oops, click 2D. Get it into the sort of position that I want. And yeah, it kind of looks like the sort of desert's reclaimed it a little bit. Yeah, I like that. Okay, good. So I'm going to show you something else now. So I'm going to take a look at this light over here. I'm going to create a quick housing for this spotlight. It's just creating a basic cylinder here, shrink it down, grow it to the right size, and texture it, of course. And then I think probably just make the light the child of it. Oh, that's just distorted it slightly. What I'll do is I'll create an empty game object. Create an empty game object, and I will make the light the child of the empty game object, and the empty game object the child of the pole. And the light is still parent-child in there, so we've got this sort of situation here. What I don't kind of like that, I'm going to put a light on the end. So I'm just going to use the same system I used with the glow before to make the evil alien eyes, but this time I'm going to make a kind of bulb coming out the front of it. Just going to position it roughly in the middle. Yeah, I can eyeball it like that. And then I'm just going to make another material. This is going to be red glow, of course. And use that kind of red there and that kind of red there. And then just drag that into there, and there we go. There's a red light source. And the red light source will move around So I'm going to create a new JavaScript. I'm going to rotate this round. I'm not going to use the same JavaScript using the Ferris wheel because I want it to rotate through a different angle. So this is going to be light spinner. But apart from that, it's going to be exactly the same format as the previous one. So it just allows me to tweak it slightly. So it contains the same things as before. It creates a variable. I'm going to call it speed light because I don't want two variables called speed. It might get confusing. And this time I'm using an integer. We're going to use function update because function update is called every single frame. So it's 30 times a second at the basic default. So basically that's real time. If you want anything to happen in real time in the game, like something to rotate around, you have to put it in function update or some subdivision of it. So we're going to transform, we're going to rotate, and we're going to need some numbers in there. I'll just put these zeros for a second. Times time dot delta time brackets semicolon. Save that. Have a quick look at the model just to check which way round we want to spin it. So set the rotation. So we want it spinning this way. So do we want it spinning through the Z-axis? Yes. This is after several tweaks here, but that does kind of work. That's more like what I was looking for. I eyeballed it in the end and put it in the script through trial and error. Okay, so the final thing I want to show you is skyboxes. Well, the penultimate thing is skyboxes. So the whole of this thing is ringed by this skybox. It's a basic skybox at the moment. It's the classic default skybox. One of the things we haven't really got into yet is that when you create a material, like so, in addition to all the stuff we've got down here, I'm just going to call this night sky, you can also change the shader, which is kind of changing the type of the material. We've only used the standard shader. There are others. So you've got particles, which are quite fun. We've got mobile for mobile gaming. But we're going to UI, if you want on-screen text, but we're going to take a look at skyboxes. We're going to use a 6-sided skybox here. So, as I was describing earlier on, a skybox is essentially a cube of limitless dimensions that's been put around the scene. And the cube is of infinite size. You can zoom out and out and out, 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 and you'll never, ever, ever reach the end of your skybox. See? Okay, so the skybox is made up of 6 sides, because it's a cube. And in the shader here, in the material here, you've got these boxes for these 6 textures. So if I go back into my assets, and I open up the classic skyboxes, you can see the 6 tiles that I might use. There's some different skybox designs I might use. Now, these originally shipped with Unity 4. I think it might have Unity 5, but you can still find them online if you search for Unity skyboxes, classic skyboxes, basic skyboxes. But of course, as with everything that you download from the internet, then you might need to do a little bit of tweaking. So I'm going to go, I'm going to go with this one. Right, so it's important that you get the right sections in the right parts of the skybox. And it doesn't always mean that just because it says back, that it is back, especially if you've downloaded it off the internet. There's a little bit of kind of test it out for yourself. So, but because it says back, I'm going to start off there. I'm going to assume that everything's working properly. That one says down. I'm going to find the down position, put it in down. What we've got here, this one says front, so it says up, put that in up. This one's, it didn't go in there. Put it in up, there we go. Right, up. And you can see it building the skybox down here to check that everything's kind of in place. So I'll put the left to left, and then finally this one up here. So in theory you can see them at this stage. That looks right, but I'm going to test it anyway. So that's my skybox. I've created the skybox material, and the skybox material is called night sky. So what I'm going to do now is I just drag the night sky into the skybox, and that's kind of cool, isn't it? That instantly changes the aspect of your scene. Let's see what difference it makes when I push play. Oh, now something's happening, isn't it? Oh, okay, right. Now, you can see straight away that's not right, is it? And also the sun's in the wrong position. I don't want the sun over there. I'll fix that in a second. Okay, so taking a look at my night sky, you can see clearly, yeah, actually this up bit is wrong. It's not right. So I'm going to work on the assumption that the up bit is in the right place, but it's the wrong way round and it needs rotating. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go into the up here. I'm just going to select it, I'm going to edit, I'm going to open it up with this open here, and this is just opening it up in the image viewer. I'm going to rotate it through 90 degrees, I'm going to save it, and then I'm going to go back and take another look. No, that's still not right, is it? Okay, alright, so we've got 3 more rotations to try. Let's try the second one. Yeah, that's done it. Okay, that seems to have fixed the problem. The problem was that the texture was the wrong way around, needed turning and turning. Okay, so now I want to get the sun on the right side of me because the shadows are coming from behind the Ferris wheel, so the sun needs to be there. So this is going to take a little bit of tweaking. Pretty simple. Go back into the Skybox material down here, and if you look at the top, we're looking at rotation. So if I move the rotation, I want the sun. Did I say I wanted the sun there? Yeah, I'm going to put the sun there and test it and play it. And let's see, where's the sun? Oh, I'm an idiot, aren't I? Right, yes, of course. So change the rotation, and I'm going to turn this round so I can see where I want the sun to be. So I want this to be behind there. So I change the rotation. See the sun is moving through the sky. Yeah, that looks about right, doesn't it? If I push play, let's take a look. And yeah, I'm kind of happy with that. There's the sun going down, and it's casting some shadows. We've got some textures on the scene. Yeah, we've got some creepy stuff. What was the like? Okay, all right. So the searchlight's got up into the sky, so I haven't quite got the script right on that. But I don't know. I kind of like it. Turn it into an obstacle, maybe an avoidance thing. Don't get hit by the light. Populate this with a few tents and banners or whatever else, and make it nice and creepy. Now, speaking of creepy, the final thing I did say I would show you is how to put some basic music on there. So if you remember, when we first came into this game, there was music. So I'm going to deal with sound of music in a later tutorial. But if you just want basic background music, then you just need to download some music. I've got some royalty-free here. And then you need to make sure that you attach this music to something that's not going to be destroyed in the scene. So don't attach it to something the player is going to collect, for example. So I'm just going to attach it to the terrain because I'm not going to destroy the terrain. So I'm going to drag it onto the terrain, and what it does is it creates an audio source. There's loads of stuff in here that we could tweak, but the only thing I really care about here is the play on awake, which means that when we start the game, it will play. I'll take the volume down ever so slightly. But play on awake is checked. It means it will play when the game starts. You get that wonderful, creepy effect that we saw earlier. So, guys, I hope you've enjoyed this tutorial. This has been Dr. H for Octo Beard Media. Next time round, we're going to take a look at a little bit more scripting. We're going to take a look at sound. We're going to take a look at picking up and collecting objects, scoring, and adding a timer. Thank you very much for watching. And do please hit subscribe.